Welcome to Disaster Hack. So grateful you could join us today. In this edition, we're going to discuss how we can find out about potential risks and then what we can do to share this information with others. In other words, we're going to talk about hazard detection and warnings. So our goal today is to understand these two concepts, explore their importance, and examine warning systems as well as their respective pros and cons. To start off, we might ask ourselves a very simple question. How does a response operation to a disaster actually begin? Well, meteorologists issue forecasts and share information about severe weather with us. People may call into 911 to report disasters. 9/11 occurred this way. We may get feedback from field personnel or have increased radio traffic. In other words, police and fire personnel may witness accidents or view an explosion that occurs in the community as they're on patrol. Reporters and news anchors may share information about disasters in the news media. We may be on our phones and all of a sudden get a notification of a disaster that's unfolding or taking place in our community. There's also information that we could get from hospitals that track diseases, and there's devices in our communities that actually scan the air for chemicals. These are just some of the ways that we might learn about hazards that are unfolding in our communities. Once we've been notified about an impending or actual disaster, it's very important that we take other steps. One of the first things we can do is gather more information. Get the details about what is occurring. We can notify others that is taking place, whether it's the mayor or department leaders. We can call up other personnel and activate our emergency response and recovery plans, and we may need to also open up and activate our emergency operations center. The point is to have further information and begin the response operation itself. So once we've obtained information about a hazard, and shared that with others, and activated our emergency response plans, we also need to warn others in the community. And this is extremely important. A warning is an advance notification that allows and suggests protective actions. We see why this is crucial from the Paradise Fire that occurred in California in 2018. Many people did not sign up for Code Red. There was not enough warning time given to people to evacuate. Communication systems were inoperable, and even the cell towers went down. Only 3 of the 14 zones in this particular area of California received warnings, and as a result, 86 people died in this fire. Research reveals that there's a definitive process through which warnings may occur. Quarantelli has identified 2 of the particular phases. First of all, there's an assessment phase where we're gathering information and making sense of it. And secondly, there's a dissemination phase where we're sharing that information with the public. Lindell and Perry's work is a little bit more complex, but it provides further information on what should be done to make warnings effective. First of all, we need to identify the risk, what's going on, for example. We need to assess the risk, explore how bad it might be. Next, we need to find ways to reduce the risk. Should we sandbag, for example, or cut a fire break? And then finally, there's protective response. So this would be an action like evacuation and sheltering. Although we might describe the process of warnings in different ways, it's very important that we understand the different types of warnings that may exist. For example, there could be a weather advisory where a meteorologist shares information about a forecast over the next several days. There could be a watch, which describes more imminent conditions of a tornado forming, for example. And then there's the warning itself, implying that either a hazard will occur or has occurred or is happening right now. Of course, we need to keep in mind that not all warnings come from meteorologists or those who monitor the weather. Others, like those in the United States Geological Survey, examine earthquakes and gas emissions, which may share information about volcanic eruptions. And of course, the Department of Homeland Security may issue warnings through the National Terrorism Warning Advisory System. Just as there are different types of warnings, there's also various means to distribute them to the public. Let's talk about a few of them and look at their pros and cons. Well, the first of which is a smoke detector or intercom or a strobe light. This is something that would be very useful in a building, particularly in the case of a fire, but it's not really helpful for those outside. Another type of warning is with the use of a loudspeaker or door-to-door notification. This is completed often by firefighters or police officers. It's very helpful for a neighborhood or an apartment complex, but it does require a lot of personnel, and it's impossible to really implement on a widespread scale. Another type of warning system is a weather radio. Citizens or businesses may own weather radios, and these radios obtain direct reports from the National Weather Service. Of course, this is very helpful for those who have a weather radio, but it only helps those who possess them. A fourth type of warning system is an outdoor siren. These are basically mechanical or electromechanical loudspeakers that either provide a tone or a public announcement. This is very useful for people who are outside at a park, for example. They're expensive and they do require a lot of maintenance. And in some ways, they're becoming a little bit obsolete due to cell phones. This brings us to the next type of warning system. Many people have Apple, Samsung, or other types of smartphones, and they're constantly on them. Warning messages can be sent through cell phones, and they're an excellent way to warn the people. Unfortunately, it's important to recognize that not everyone has a smartphone. And, of course, smartphones are reliant on electricity and cell towers, both of which may be rendered inoperable in a disaster situation. Reverse 911 is another system which is utilized to warn people. In this case, computer programs call residents, and warnings can be sent to specifically targeted areas. These warnings can happen almost instantaneously. Of course, there is a cost for these programs, and it's very important that you maintain the lists of the names and phone numbers and addresses of people so that you know who you are targeting when you issue a warning. The Emergency Alert System, or EAS, is one of the most common warning systems in our country. It's a national public warning system, and it utilizes radio, TV, cable, and other sources to issue warnings to the population. It's based on a partnership between FEMA, NOAA, and the FCC, and it allows the president to speak to our entire country. One of the great benefits is that it is a national system. One of the drawbacks is that it's not focused on local hazards, at least not initially. Regardless of which type of warning system we're using to share information with the public, it's imperative that we keep a couple of key principles in mind. First of all, our warning messages must be clear so they're understood. They must be concise. Sometimes shorter messages eliminate confusion. It's important that our messages are consistent, that they're repeated frequently, and that the same message is heard over and over again. Our messages must be credible in that they're given by leaders who people know and understand and respect. And the messages must contain useful recommendations, advice for protective actions. Keep in mind the Homeland Security system that existed in the past had almost none of these, and that's why it was the butt of many jokes on late night TV. By way of summary, response and recovery operations begin with hazard detection. Warnings save lives. There are many different types of warning systems, and they range from outdoor sirens to cell phones. And each one has different advantages and disadvantages. We also need to keep in mind that warnings should be clear, concise, consistent, given by credible authorities, and contain useful recommendations for those that receive them. If you're interested in additional information, I would point you to 2 articles. Of course, there's many out there, and this first one's a little bit dated, but it's a great overview of what we know about warnings. The second article talks more about crisis communication during the COVID pandemic and what went wrong in that regard. In any case, I hope this video has been helpful, and thanks for joining us.